The Sega Master System, or rather the Sega Mark III, launched in Japan in October of 1985. It launched with just 2 games, which may seem small, but was actually par for the course for 1980 consoles. For example, the Famicom launched with 3 titles, and just like the Famicom, the Master System's launch titles were arcade conversions. Most notable among the initial batch was a port of Yu Suzuki's seminal super scalar arcade racer, Hang On. Now, Hang On was a relatively recent game. It was only in the arcades less than 6 months by the time of the Master System launch. This made it a relatively big deal, especially if you were plunking down plenty of yen in the case of the Japanese launch, dollars and pounds to play such a title. Now, it would also have been known for its full body experience. The big stand-up arcade machine where you can tilt the motorbike using motion controls 20 years before that would become popular, or at least popular at a home console level. So it made sense that Sega would look to port this as a launch title. And so it would prove to be a launch title not only in Japan, but also in Europe and America when the system travelled west. It wasn't released until 1986 in the EU and in America, and when it came out in the EU, it actually came out as a card release, whereas in America, it was never available as a standalone game, but rather bundled with either Safari Hunt or Astro Warrior, games we'll cover in a future SMS Ages video. It would also go on to become a common bundle title with the system, usually with the aforementioned Safari Hunt as well. So it very much became a staple release. So much so that when Sega eventually released the cost-reduced version of the Master System, aka the Master System Model 2, which no longer had a card port on it, they deemed it worthy to re-release the game in Europe as a cartridge. So clearly, even though the game would have been a good 4 or 5 years old at the time, it was still considered a good enough seller that for Sega to report the game onto a cartridge and continue to sell it. The goal in Hang On is to complete all 8 courses, each comprising of multiple 4km sections. The SMS version features a loose story too, about competing against some rival biker company, but this is only mentioned in the manual, and in reality the game is your basic endurance challenge. In truth, the enemy bikers are just another obstacle to be avoided, no different really to the road signs and debris on the side of the road. In truth, the real enemy is the timer, which was a common feature for arcade games of the 80s. Failure to reach the next checkpoint before the time runs out leads to an instant game over, and no doubt the desired effect of putting another quarter in the arcade machine. Thankfully that's not the case for the home conversion, where you can keep retrying, but with no continues to speak, the Master System version actually maintains quite a challenge. The Master System version was developed internally by Sega itself, and it seems to be one of quite a number of games where Katsuhiro Hasegawa produced for the Sega Master System and other Sega home consoles. Katsuhiro Hasegawa would go on to become a relatively prodigious developer on the Master System, so we'll see his work again, but he made quite a good impression for such an early title. The graphics and handling are actually quite faithful to the arcade system, especially when you consider the difference in hardware capacity. I mean, the Sega Master System, while impressive for a home console of the day, is certainly no super scalar arcade machine. Now, the game does lose a fair bit of its kind of initial appeal without the environmental cabinet, but it still has that one more go factor, and that actually does give the title just that extra bit of longevity that may have initially seemed to kind of not exist for such a simple game. Ultimately, all you're doing is steering your bike left and right, changing your gears and holding down the throttle, and just fighting that timer again and again. The scenery changes a little bit, and the challenges and the timer gets harder and harder, but ultimately it's just the same thing repeated ad nauseum. And yet, I would personally find that when I've played a game, as soon as you finish, you kind of end up berating yourself for silly mistakes and jump straight back in. Today, it's hard to place Hang On. It's a game that is relatively simple. You will certainly find many better racing games on the Master System, those that are more technically advanced, more enjoyable, more depth. But Hang On still has something. I guess you could say that it does live up to its name. Its many releases also means that Hang On is still very cheap. So for collectors of the system, it's easy to get hold of. In fact, it may even be bundled in new right into the system for you. So if you're a brand new collector, perhaps you might also start your Master System collection, like so many would have done in the past when the system launched. As an interesting side note, a pseudo-sequel, Hang On 2, would be released for the precursor to the Sega Master System, the original Sega SG-1000, the following year in Japan. Now this game is probably more of a novelty than anything else, and while it may be directed or named as a sequel, is really more of a downport of the Master System title to the older hardware. The visual difference is quite apparent, and it really does highlight the step up between the original SG-1000 and the Mark III hardware. So for that, it becomes an interesting curio, but probably not something worth revisiting as a gameplay experience today. Certainly not with the better Master System version available, and much easier to obtain. Thanks for watching SMS Ages. If you like this episode, then why not try some of the other episodes or other content on the channel, and perhaps like, subscribe and share to help spread the word. Next time on SMS Ages, a game that will give you the blues.